Hi, Donald Davidoff, co-founder and CEO of Real Estate Business Analytics, here for another episode of The People Behind the Performance, where I sit down with key leaders and disruptors to dive into what's driving the real estate industry's success, the role data plays in it all, and more importantly, tell the stories of the people behind it all. I'm here today with a very special guest. Doug Bibby is president of the National Multifamily Housing Council, and he's set to retire from the role at NMHC's annual meeting coming up this January, less than a month away, I believe, or a little more than a month away, I should say. For more than 20 years, Doug's leadership has proven critical to the national success of the multifamily housing industry, most recently guiding the association and its members through the unparalleled changes caused by the pandemic and resulting financial distress. Prior to joining NMHC, Doug spent 16 years as a senior officer of Fannie Mae, where he served in the company's management committee throughout his tenure. He began his career with the worldwide communication firms J. Walter Thompson, where he served a variety of clients both domestically and internationally over his 12-year career with the company. Doug's been active in the nonprofit community in Washington, D.C. for the past 30 years, and I'm just absolutely honored and proud to be able to call Doug a friend. Welcome, Doug.
Thank you very much, Donald. Great to be with you.
Yeah, let's dive right in. So we'll begin at the beginning. How did you start in the industry? What we heard the dry bio, but what really got you into the industry?
Well, I was really lucky to get an interview with David Maxwell, who had been recruited to Fannie Mae in the very early 80s, when it was still trying to shed its government bureaucratic shell, basically, with hundreds of civil servants and a mountain of debt and this huge block of mismatched assets and liabilities, $64 billion of totally mismatched, 5.5 years mismatched, if you think about it. It just was extraordinary. It was a train wreck, and I was really lucky to be able to be brought in with the team that eventually turned the company around in a big way. But I fell in love with real estate, not real estate writ large, but I fell in love with residential real estate, I guess, and the affordability challenges that we tried to solve at Fannie. And admittedly, I spent most of my time on the single family side because that was 95% of our business. And we were building a business on the multifamily side, but really didn't have much to go on in the early 80s when I came in. When I then left Fannie and did some entrepreneurial stuff after that, again, it was just a matter of luck to get introduced to someone who said, "Hey, this NMHC job is open. Would you like to interview for it?" And I said, "Oh, sure." I didn't know, so for those who know these folks will know how exciting it was for me to meet the search team when I first met them. And it was Gary Kachadurian, Leonard Wood Sr., Jeff Stack, Doug Crocker, and Marianne King, and that was the five. And they're a powerhouse search committee. I began to get very intrigued. Hey, this could be really a lot of fun and interest. And then I put myself in the second round there, and I was lucky enough to get selected. That was almost 22 years ago.
Yeah, I was going to say that's really a who's who of the history of multifamily. And I think about it meetings these days. I mean, not to sound like the old grandpa that just wants kids to get off the lawn, but there's a lot of people in the industry who've been in the industry even a decade who don't necessarily know those names. So good to hear that.
Yeah, I mean, and I can track through them, just real briefly because some folks are gonna know some of these names.
Right.
Rick Campo, and these are my chairs now of this organization. Rick Campo, the co-founder of Camden. Tom Bizzuto, everybody knows who he is. Sue Ansel, CEO of Gables. David Schwartz, CEO of Waterton, and now Ken Valek, the CEO of Trammell Crow Residential, and Peter Donovan, Bob DeWitt, retired, both retired now, but all of them served and Daryl Carter. How could I forget Daryl?
Yeah.
Former MIT associate of yours.
I was going to say you can't forget there's few enough MIT people in this industry. I love Daryl.
Yeah, he has 2 degrees from MIT though. Donald, do you have 2?
No, but mine is undergrad. He'll be reminding me. Mine's undergraduate, and I think his are.
Yeah, he's from the Sloan. The one was from the Sloan School. I don't know. I forget the second. But anyway, that is a who's who list. And many of them now are not only have been business associates and leaders of this organization, but they're now my friends.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of this industry. It's huge in some respects. It's over $3 trillion, but it's small in other respects. And
Yeah.
and the respect that people have for each other in this business is really one of the more impressive and motivating sides of my career.
It's interesting you say that, because I've said to many people, I mean, a big part of how I got stuck in the flypaper of multifamily housing, right? I came from the outside, and because the industry is so fragmented, right? It's not. I grew up in travel. It's not Marriott versus Hyatt. It's not United versus American Airlines, right? We actually can afford to be nice to each other and even help each other. And I came in on the I came in on the REIT side. If Doug Crocker sneezed, we caught the flu at Archstone. I mean, we were all in it together, rising and falling. We tried to beat each other by a little, but at the end of the day, the rising boat really did lift all tides.
Yeah, no, it is. You hit the nail on the head. I mean, these people that I mentioned compete furiously with each other, but they also end up being business partners on certain deals. Some lend to the others, and some are joint venture partners, some are equity investors in the others. And so it's all over the map, but the beauty is it's small enough that you can really get to know the key players. So, for me, it's been the highlight of my career, Donald, I'll tell you, just being in this position, and just been great.
Yeah. So looking back on that career a little bit still, I mean, you mentioned a couple names, maybe they'll come up again, but who's been your either most influential, or maybe a couple of particularly influential mentors in your career?
Yeah. Oh, definitely. I would say Jeff Stack. She tells me I'm her mentor, but Marianne King has been really helpful to me. Peter Donovan, Daryl, Tom, I mean, all of them in some way or other. It's hard to, it's like, who's your favorite child? They have, going back to the Fannie days, and he remains my dear friend today, is David Maxwell, who was my original mentor. Coming out of the goofy advertising and PR business, it was such I couldn't pick a mentor out of that business. But David was and remains just an inspiration to me.
Cool.
But the whole group, I mean, and they all played different roles. They all inspired me or directed me or helped me chart my way through. Rick Campo and I were joined at the hip 2008, 2009. He was my chairman during that time. He hasn't forgiven me yet. but we got through that. And Crocker and I were in the aftermath of 2001 of the attack on the United States. And then David Schwartz and I were together during the pandemic. So I've had different folks work with me through those three challenges. And by the way, those are my bookends in the middle. So I had the 2001 terrorist attack. I had the 2008, 2009, financial crisis, and then the pandemic. So it's like, I've certainly learned to live with crisis.
Yeah, I was really good to hear Jeff Stack's name. It's interesting because I never did any business with Jeff, but through NMHC, got to see him on stage, got to occasionally briefly even talk to him. The funny thing is, Reba actually does have Sarah Regis as a client now after Jeff's time, but he truly was like the definition of a mensch. I mean, he was such a mensch, and watching him from stage, I was proud to be part of an organization that had leaders like that, and it's just good to hear his name again.
Here's a guy who essentially created Sarah Regis, but he worked on the Hill. He served as a captain in Vietnam for 2 tours of duty. And then built this company, and the culture there is very, very strong. And I looked, you can always tell the companies like Bozzuto and Sarah Regis and Camden and others. I'm getting to know Avaneth even better now as Daryl has built that company. Sue Ansell with Gables. and so
Yeah.
on, Bob DeWitt and at GID. They have created really strong cultures.
Yeah.
I think you probably feel the same way I did. You fell into this industry sector and you haven't
Yep.
wanted to leave. And other than
No.
my feeling, I got to step aside after almost 22 years and let some younger people,
Yeah.
run this organization. I wouldn't leave it because I love this business.
Mm-hmm. No, well, it's a sign of leadership to recognize that there is a time to let others, have their day in the sun and bring their ideas. I'm looking forward. I'm a little bit younger than you. I'm looking forward to when I get to make that decision and step aside.
Yeah.
So I mean, you've been out on the front lines of PR for the industry for so long with the public, maybe even more importantly with legislators. What's a common myth about the industry that you've just had to constantly battle?
Oh boy. How much time do we have?
Yeah.
There are. I think first of all, very few policymakers understand who owns apartments. They think that
Mm-hmm.
Blackstone and Starwood and BlackRock and a few other large institutional owners, maybe JP Morgan, own all the units. And then there's a smattering of
Right.
individuals who own them. And nothing could be farther from the truth. The top 50 owners in the NMHC 50 that's published every year own 10% of the units.
Yeah.
You'd find me another industry sector where the top 50 have that small a market share. I challenge anybody, it's just that fragmented. So that's, who owns, and then, what are the returns, say on the from the business side? When I took this job, I would say to people, how does the sector perform? And they'd say, well, we invest in office and retail. And if I'm asked to invest in multifamily, I'm going to need a 250, 300 basis point premium to do it.
Yeah.
Well, look at today. It's
Yeah.
completely upside down. And I think there we managed to get people to understand the returns on this business are steady, very competitive. And I'd say European investors would say to me, well, I don't like your leases turnover every year. I said, yeah, they do. And I said, typically they price up.
Higher. Yeah, that's a good thing.
9 out of 10 times they price up. So what if you have a office building where you're 50% of your space is one client and they go under?
Yep.
You are sitting with a huge hole.
Yeah.
And so so it's who owns, how does it perform, who rents? That used to be, well, there are only two types of renters. One is the very poor and they can't afford to do anything else. And the other group is on their way to home ownership and they're just in apartments for that time. I think what we've seen over the past year, almost 15 years now, is that people rent by choice. And we've become almost like the rest of the world in that renting is much more, highly regarded in Germany and England and other places, and certainly in Latin America. So the renters by choice becoming a very strong part of it.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the names you just mentioned, and I'll add one other. Obviously, Scott Sellers, back from Archstone, which is how I got into business. But Sue and Jeff and Rick and Scott and Doug, and then the other people after him at Equity, and many others, I'm sure, who deserve credit. Really, I mean, I remember when I came in the industry, I started working with Archstone in '99 on the vendor side, right? I was working for the pricing software company. Became the industry's first vice president of pricing revenue management in late 2001. And I remember back then, conversations around how not too many years before, operations was viewed as the necessary evil between doing deals. And the list of people I named and so many others had this idea, well, wait a moment, what if we actually create operating companies, right? What if we actually deliver value through the rental process? And deal making is still important, but now so is operations. And that really fundamentally changed the industry, I don't know, between, say, the mid-90s and the mid-aughts. And we actually have customer-centered product now in a way we never had. And I think NMHC had a big part in leading that.
We did, and you mentioned some names there that I was just going through my chair positions. I mean, the
Right.
Scott Sellers and the Tom Toomeys and the
Yes.
what I would consider the people looking around the corner and thinking strategically.
Mhm.
Scott and Tom and some others, and we're way
Yeah, probably
ahead.
throwing Terry Considine for the Denver Mafia.
Terry
Since I'm in Denver.
Considine,
Yep.
they're just a different group, but just as impressive and just as important. And you're right. I mean, when you and I first met, this industry was, the learning curve is here now. It was down here, and in terms of just use of technology, we were in our infancy, and we had just come out of a swashbuckling era, and you think about it, it's not so unusual to expect that we would have had to climb this technology curve and then have it intersect so neatly with operations. But the modern multifamily business is essentially a little over 30 years old, and I'll tell you why.
Yeah.
In the early 90s, you had the REITs going public, and you had the EQRs and others going public, and that was really important because it brought other sources of capital. It brought transparency. It brought risk taking. That they, moderate risk taking. The other piece of it was, my dear friend Larry Dale, who came to Fannie Mae in the late 80s, created the DUS program, Delegated Underwriting and Service. And prior to that point, we had tried to build a multifamily business and failed miserably twice. And Freddie tried to build a business and they totally bombed. So when you came into the early 90s, Fannie brought its DUS program to the market. And that brought, when you think about it, Fannie Mae has always been able to attract international capital. By creating this vehicle, it brought huge sources of capital to potential capital to multifamily. And then Freddie got its act together. And the two of them, along with the REITs going public, just catapulted this sector forward. And so that's,
I mean, it's hard to imagine. I mean, it's hard to imagine a day. I mean, you lived it, but it's hard to imagine a day where Fannie and Freddie were irrelevant to multifamily. I mean, they're so core.
I know. I mean, I got there. We had started a mortgage-backed securities program, and we had created a national market for adjustable rate mortgages. But before that, there was no common, index basically, and no real, KPIs around it.
Right.
And so we created those two, but then multifamily was next. It was like, okay, well, let's bring in so-and-so. He bombed. Well, let's bring in so-and-so. He bombed. And then, we just couldn't get it going. Larry came in and had been at HUD and part of their risk sharing programs. And so he took that knowledge and he brought it to Fannie Mae and created the DUS program, which has been spectacularly successful. And then,
No, I mean, it's fantastic to hear all that. So, looking back on, so many years, as you said, 20 plus years, 22 years or whatever at NMHC, I'm sure you've been asked this before, but for our audience, what are some of the things you're most proud of accomplishing over such a career? I guess I'll spoon feed you the first one. You came in and actually helped the industry survive 9/11. The 2008, 2009 Great Recession, and then COVID. I mean, that's sort of, okay, that's a Hall of Fame list right there. But what are some of the other things maybe that you're really proud of?
Yeah, as I mentioned, I think just getting, raising the stature of this sector with lots of different audiences. One thing some people don't like to hear, but it's a fact of life in Washington, we built a very, very powerful PAC.
Yeah.
That, we have a seat at the table. I built the best staff in the association business, bar none. We have depth, and we cover research, communications, lobbying, and then all the meetings and membership that we do. So I'm really proud of the team, and I'm proud of the way the industry has responded to each challenge that we've had. I can pick up the phone and say, Rick, I need you to do this, and he may grouse at me, but typically they will come to the fore and support. what we're trying to do. If I want them to go on the Hill, Rick and Daryl and Peter Donovan and, Bob DeWitt and Tom Bizzuto all have testified. Sue Ansel as another one, have testified before Senate, House, or different, subcommittees. So very proud of that. And then the other thing I'm really proud of, and this, is we took this nascent technology conference and we nurtured it for years as we, as the software programs and packages came on and we tested them and we, we'd have to have private meetings with the owner operators because they were tearing their hair out with all the beta testing that was going on. But it got to a point of sophistication where we said, okay, it's not like technology anymore. It's technology and operations. And the marriage of those two, back to your earlier point, so important and so vital. And that's when it became OpTech. We had over 2,000 people. We had maybe 75 to 100 in the early days, going to these conferences. So now, well over 2,000, coming to OpTech.
My first one was 2001, and you're right, it was probably 100 people. And now 2,500 or whatever it was at this last one. A couple of quick things I'll highlight. So I'll point to again, that leadership. Like, one of the things that's impressed me, and I grew up, my father was president of the American Society of Travel Agents at one point. In fact, he worked on staff there also, one of the few people to be on both sides. He knew Doug Culkin and Liz Culkin really well, which was an amusing connection. That 20 years later, I meet Doug, and he and my dad had worked together 30 years before. Anyway, most trade associations, I'm not trying to be overly critical, but I'll just say that the paid leadership tends to follow the political winds of the elected leadership out of out of preservation, right? Self-preservation. One of the things that's really impressed me, and it's got to be coming from you, Doug, because it can only come from a leader, is places where you dragged the industry where it needed to go. I mean, you guys did the white paper on revenue management when Equity was saying Archstone was nuts. I remember the session where Margette interviewed Jaja Jackson on short-term rental. And I mean, I got up to say, hey guys, I don't see what the problem is. It's just another stream of demand. And if people had lasers out of their eyes, I'd have been fried. I mean, but you individually, you plurally put that on the stage. That's a pretty gutsy thing to do, to force the membership to talk about something that you knew at the time they didn't like, but you realized they really had to. And then, today, short-term rentals are short-term rentals. We just deal with them, right? So I'm sort of curious, where did that courage come from?
Well, I don't know. Sometimes you wonder, you got to have strength in your convictions. And I think you go back to a couple of things I'll cite for you. One was the Aaron Brockovich era, where everyone was trying to say that mold is causing all these circulation and issues with people, and so there were 10,000 lawsuits across the country. We went to the CDC and the National Academy of Sciences, and he said, we need to have a rigorous study done. We rolled the dice. And when they came back and said there's no connection, those lawsuits evaporated. And it was, to me, was just so fulfilling. And the second one was when this one organization called the Equal Rights Center started suing, and Scott was one of the first ones because Archstone was under A. So Scott was, I think, the first sued on
ADA.
violations of ADA and Fair Housing Act.
Oh yeah. Yep.
And what we decided to do after we, they started just one after the other coming in, and Camden was hit, all of them. And we said, what is the problem here? And we brought in some consultants who had worked on the other side. They'd worked for the advocacy groups, but we said, we want you because we want to understand how to fix this. And what we put out was, we need to have tolerances for turnaround areas, for the width of doors, for, whatever it is, or access to a balcony. We need to have tolerances here. It can't be 1/16 of an inch. What's the tolerance here? And we published this, and those lawsuits. And then we met with this group and said, look, let's work together. I mean, there are some people out there who aren't doing the thing properly, but many are. And if they're a 1/16 of an inch off, don't go sue them. Let them fix it. Let them remediate it. And so that was the whole approach, was give them time to remediate
Yeah.
without suing them and causing all this just disruption. So really proud of that. And then the last thing I'm really proud of with the staff was, and we were getting blowback from a lot of areas, but during the early stages of the pandemic, what do we need to do to mitigate this?
Yeah.
We all thought, God, the whole ship's going to fall off the cliff,
Right.
of Niagara Falls and go straight down. And so we put out advice to our members saying,
Yeah.
don't evict for blank number of, I think it was 3 months. Don't, and moderate your increases, or don't increase your rents.
I remember that.
And some of it was controversial, but in the main, our members said, we're with you. We've got to try to keep people in their homes.
Yeah, I also remember. Yeah, I mean, if we sell housing, people not being able to live in their homes is not good for any of us.
Yeah.
I also remember part of that, and again, data is near and dear to my heart. That's how I got into the industry. It's obviously what real estate business analytics is all about. I remember one of the other things you guys did, which talking with Kim, I think had a little bit of controversy at the start, was the rent payment tracker. And so we brought data, and what I found was it was really fascinating, because what that data did was it helped the legislatures understand what the problem really was. And at the same time, it helped the operators not overreact, because while it wasn't good, it wasn't nearly as bad as many of us feared. And nothing like data to shine a light on dark places. Maybe mention a little bit about sort of how did that come
that was,
because it was massive.
Donald, that was really, we talked about it. We made one mistake at the very start of this thing in terms of not giving a full 6 days to the first report, and I got a lot of blowback on that. But it was the right thing to do. Policymakers, the media, think tanks, investors were all tuning in, and we had 11 million units covered by these 5 software providers. So you can't sneeze at that. That's over 50% of the market. And so, so that was, it was courageous, but it was really, really important. And over time, then it became the standard.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, I in my consulting practice back then, I referenced it, every single time it came out. In fact, if it was an hour late, I was emailing Kim, where is it? I'm sure I wasn't the only one. Anyway, so yeah, I mean, so speaking of that period, I mean, we've obviously had an interesting past few years. I believe you delayed your departure even twice in order to help through this. So yeah, so now that they're finally letting you go, when you look back, what do you see as some of the key lessons that we learned from those very difficult COVID years?
Yeah, I think what we learned from just centering on what we just talked about was that people do respect their lease agreement. In the main, most people do. And so they would go out of their way. We hear horror stories about so-and-so got, CARES Act money and went out and bought a Tesla and didn't pay the rent. Well, okay, you can hear those things, but most people respect their lease agreement and respect their obligations. So, and then the second thing is you could never communicate enough with your residents and never show them enough love. I mean, I'm serious. I heard it from people who own 10 units to those who own 80,000 units. I just, the one who owns 10 units said, I called every single one of them. I asked to see them in person if they couldn't do that or wouldn't. We talked it through. What do you need? How can I help you? So, to your earlier point, if we don't have people living in apartments and they don't have a roof over their head, we don't have a business. We're done. We don't have a business. So, being customer centric, really, really important. And then the third, I think, is just the importance of, another of your points earlier, the importance of data and facts to bolster whatever your argument you're trying to make. And I told the staff when I first met with them, I said, look, we're going to win on the facts. We're not going to go up there and win some PR battle. If everybody thinks homeownership is the best way to go, I'm not going to go. I can't spend $300 million on a campaign to try to fight that. But we're going to demonstrate the good things that are happening, which we have. So, data and credibility, transparency, communication, all super important. But this is a phenomenal sector. It truly is. We are unique in the world in our ability to bring capital in from all over the world. And we're continue to modernize, and evolve. Think where build to rent was, 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So
No, it's amazing. Yeah, it's amazing how I mean, look at how many multifamily professionals are now on the single family side because of the value that was built up over those 20 years that you were talking about. It's, it's going to change that into, that part of the industry.
Well, one of your colleagues, one of your former colleagues was chosen very early on, Dana Hamilton, to, who had been sent over to Germany to look at that market as an investment, and then came back but Kevin Baldridge and John Bartling and,
Chaz Mueller.
Blanking now from Equity Residential. Anyway, I'll think of
wasn't it Fred?
Fred,
right?
Fred Tuami.
Fred Tuami. Yeah. Oh yeah. Fred was huge there. And
yes.
I mean, all the guys from Avalon Bay that went over an invitation and, it's very, very interesting. Hey, just a couple of questions before we finish up with our fun bit. What's maybe sort of one thing you wish you would solve that you're kind of leaving your successor and you wish you didn't have to leave that to her?
I really, I was just interviewed for something. I said, what are your regrets? And I said, I don't have any big regrets. I don't have any.
Yeah.
But
so I didn't use the word
I'm
regret.
a typical CEO. Okay. I make mistakes every single day. Okay. Every day.
Yes.
So let's just establish that. That's a given.
Yep.
But the other piece of it is the things I regret are where I didn't pull the plug on an unsuccessful employee.
Yes.
Or I tried to save someone because I'm such a wonderful leader manager. I can do that. And in most cases, I couldn't because the person was flawed for that type of assignment. Not necessarily flawed, but flawed for that assignment.
Yeah, just bad fit.
Yeah, it's a bad fit. And so those are the areas that I think I really look back on and say, I should have pulled that plug like 16 months, earlier. I didn't. So anyway.
Yep. So here's another question you probably been asked a dozen times, but I got to ask it, right? You said you don't like sitting on the beach. You don't see yourself golfing every day. So what is Doug Bibby going to be doing in 2023 and beyond?
Yeah. Doug Bibby is still figuring this out, but I have joined one national nonprofit board that's still in the industry. I'm going to try to stay in the industry with whatever I do. Whether I consult or whether I serve on boards or I'm not looking for a full-time gig. I can tell you that I'm not, but I don't know. I'm trying to figure it out. And so I love to travel. I'm going to do some traveling. I do love playing tennis and I love playing golf and I love walking and I love biking and, so I'll keep active. I think you stay young when you stay active and I don't want to find myself looking at Netflix, deciding what movie to watch that afternoon. So you won't see me doing that.
Sounds good. Okay. Well, now that we've done the heavy lifting, we like to end these interviews with a little sort of fun, rapid fire kind of James Lipton style, if you remember inside the actor studio. So the only rule is don't think too hard. First question, what book has influenced you the most?
Oh my God. I'll say Guns, Germs, and Steel.
Okay. What's your favorite time of day?
Morning.
What's your favorite app?
My favorite app?
App, yes, like on your phone, on your smartphone. Apple,
Google.
Good one. What's your biggest pet peeve?
People not giving credit to others.
Oh, that's a good one.
Really bothers me.
Yep. What's your spirit animal?
My who?
Your spirit animal. You and I are too old to know what spirit animals are, but
a cheetah.
A cheetah. I love that. If you had to pick one food to eat forever, what would that be?
Oh God. I know it's supposed to be rapid fire. I'm a foodie. Okay. I'd go crazy.
Okay. And the last one, what's your go-to for a good laugh?
I don't know. I find humor in so many different things and so many different ways. I read the comics every day. I read Pickles is my favorite. If you ever see that Pickles, the older couple.
We'll go with that, Pickles. Yep. We'll go with Pickles. Well, so thanks so much for sharing your time with us, Doug. Couple things. I'm going to give a plug. You mentioned the PAC earlier. I'm a proud multi-year
Yes.
contributor to the PAC. As I say to other people, what is it? Was it Winston Churchill, right? Democracy is the worst form of government except for all other forms. Okay, giving money, not giving money to the PAC is the worst thing to do, except not giving money to the PAC, right? As long as the government continues to allow that kind of money, like I'll be the first one to outlaw all PACs. But if PACs are legal, to your point, if you don't have a seat at the table, you don't have a voice. And this industry's been very, very good to me. And it's the easiest check I write every year because it's giving back so that the industry is just as good next year and more importantly, 10 years from now.
Really appreciate that. And we're very balanced, for people who do.
Oh, yeah.
We give just about 50% to either party. And, frankly, people respect us for that. I've seen too many cases where there's 75% for one party and, that's just not smart.
No, it's our PAC, the NMHC PAC is for housing, for rental housing, not for the other politics. So with that plug, where can people find more information about NMHC in general? And if we manage to convince them, maybe give them where online they can learn about the PAC as well.
Well, and go to www.nmhc.org. Make sure it's .org. And you can find out anything you want to do, what we're working on in research, the PAC, our DEI programs, everything is in one place. And we're really in the process of a multi-year revitalization of our entire communications system. So I won't be there to enjoy it, but also I won't be there for the pain points that we have to go through.
I'm glad you mentioned DEI because I know that's near and dear to your heart. And just in the little more, we've already gone a little over half an hour. Just not enough time, but not because it wasn't important. I was just fascinated by the history. In fact, if there's ever a university class on the history of NMHC or the history of the industry, I think they need to make this interview required watching because some of your reflections on the old days really, really interesting to me. So
it's a passion of mine. But thank you, and it just a look back at you kind of thing. You've done so much for the industry. Such a great thinker. And an honest broker. And, every time I've talked to you, about solving a problem, you've always been the honest broker. And I appreciate that.
Thank you so much for that. That honesty sometimes gets me in trouble. What is it? A strength is a weakness overdone. I get myself in trouble, but I'll take it too. Thank you, Doug. Thanks so much.
All right. Thank you, Don. Okay. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.